In this video, we'll learn how to use the SCP command in Linux and Windows to copy files from a remote system to a local system, and from a local system to a remote system. The SCP command relies on the SSH protocol. On the local computer where you're running the SCP command, only an SSH client is needed. The good news is that Linux, macOS, and Windows all come with the SCP command installed by default. However, on the remote server side, you need OpenSSH server to accept incoming SSH connections. So the OpenSSH server must be running on the remote computer. If your Linux system doesn't have an SSH server, here's how to set up OpenSSH. If the remote computer is a Windows system, the OpenSSH server is also available for Windows. The basic syntax of the SCP command looks like this. Here the source is the file or folder you want to copy, and the destination is where you want to copy it to. When specifying a remote source or destination, the format is as follows: username followed by the @ symbol, then the IP address or hostname of the server, followed by a colon, and finally, the path to the file or folder on that server. The user @ portion is optional if your local username is the same as the remote username. If it's missing, the SCP command will use your local user account name. For example, if your local username is user1 and your username on the remote server is also user1, you can specify the remote path without including the username. Let's look at an example of copying a local file to a remote server. In this case, we want to copy the local file file1.txt. We'll use the username user1 to connect to the server at IP address 192.168.1.10, and the file will be copied to the /tmp folder on the remote server. You can also copy multiple files at once from the local computer by specifying each file, separated by a space before the destination. To copy an entire directory and its contents including subdirectories, you need to use the -r option for recursive copying. For example, the following command copies the local directory dr1 recursively to the /tmp directory on the remote server. You can also copy files in the other direction, from a remote computer to your local computer. For example, here I'm going to download file1.txt from the remote host and save it to the current working directory on my local computer. And just like when copying local directories to a remote server, if you want to download an entire directory from a remote server, you must remember to use the -r option for recursive copying. If you want to download multiple files at once, you can specify each file path before the destination like this. However, it's important to note that this specific syntax for downloading multiple files with a single command might not work as expected in Windows CMD or PowerShell. This multiple file download syntax typically works on the Linux version of the SCP command. Another way to transfer multiple files at once is by using a wildcard. For example, this command will download all files that start with file. It's also possible to copy files between two remote computers using SCP, but the data is transferred through your local machine. For example, this command copies the var www directory from 192.168.1.10 to 1.20. And the last example we'll look at is how to copy files using an identity file or private key if you're using passwordless authentication. The command option to specify the identity file is -i. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial on the SCP command. If you found it helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Linux tips and tutorials.